It's your Friday daily delivery. I am Michael Rand. Happy to be back for another day. Hope everybody's having a great day out there today. A little bit snowy yesterday. Caught me by surprise. Not a lot, but enough to make it a little bit more challenging to get around, a little bit more challenging to walk through. So everybody be careful out there today. That is your dad warning for the morning. Great show coming up to keep you safe inside. Ben Goessling from the Star Tribune will join me here in just a little bit to talk Vikings, getting ready for their playoff game Monday against the Rams, all that entails. And you can hear more from us, too, on the Access Vikings podcast that went up yesterday. Ben and I dug deep into some stuff with Brian Flores, with Kevin O'Connell, but also just how to get Sam Darnold back on track after last week's clunker, to put it mildly, against the Lions. So look for that in a little bit. Got some college football playoff thoughts. Good game last night. At the end of the show, Wolves and Wild here in a minute. They both played last night. Dramatically different results for those teams. First, though, what I miss, circling back on the Vikings for just a minute. That game against the Rams has officially been moved to Arizona. Not a surprise, given everything we've seen in the last 3 or 4 days with the fires in Los Angeles and the potential that they could kind of get even worse this weekend. Hopefully that is obviously not the case, but NFL had to make a call at some point, probably trying to make it feasible for teams logistically to get themselves straightened out and ready to travel, things like that. The Rams needed notice for sure. The humanitarian toll is like 1,000 times more important than football, obviously, but this will impact the football game the Vikings are about to play. This negates, to a degree, any kind of home field advantage the Rams had in this game. It won't be in their home stadium anymore. Yeah, it's not a great, home crowd, I don't think, for the Rams, but it certainly would have been a better home crowd in their home stadium. There's familiarity, everything like that, as opposed to both teams traveling to Arizona in a neutral site environment. And of course, the Vikings have a lot of fans in Arizona. I know one of them, who is on this podcast weekly, Keith Rashad, is excited about the prospect of maybe going to that game on Monday. Now, I do know Rams season ticket holders have priority for a first couple hours today to buy tickets to the game, but I'm sure there will be plenty of seats available for those who want to travel to see that game, or those who don't have that far to go. Snowbirds, people who have relocated from Minnesota to Arizona. I would imagine there will be a lot of Vikings fans at that game. So just an interesting wrinkle to this game, obviously under terrible circumstances. But like I said, this will impact the football game. I wonder if it will impact, obviously impacts crowd noise. It impacts the environment in the game. It impacts, who has any kind of advantage in this game from a crowd standpoint. Obviously the Vikings 14-3, Rams 10-7. You can say, hey, it's not like the Rams are getting completely hosed here. The Vikings had 4 more wins during the regular season, so having this at a neutral site feels fair to a certain degree, even though, of course, the rules are the division winners get the home field, things like that. But I'll be curious to see how this impacts the game itself and how this impacts everybody's week, because it's just a strange set of circumstances, almost like going to play the Super Bowl, but in a first-round game at a neutral site. Very rare in the NFL. I believe this has only happened one other time, and that was 90 years ago, and it wasn't even because of anything other than wanting better attendance at a game where a neutral site was chosen for a playoff game that wasn't the Super Bowl. So a huge story, huge kind of implications for the Vikings and the Rams. The Wolves played and won a true road game last night at Orlando. Good for them to be taking care of business these last few games. You had the lineup switch, led to the first win against the Clippers. They won that game, and it was a tense one. Obviously, they had to make plays down the stretch. Won that game, I think, 108-106, then had to go to New Orleans for a back-to-back right after that. Kind of grinded out that win, but a win nonetheless against one of the worst teams in the league And then last night against Orlando, a team decimated by injuries right now. So many of their best players still out right now. Wolves, kind of calmly took care of business. A 15-point win, 104-89. I think they were up 20 before they put all the reserves in with a few minutes left. Just kind of pulled away, took care of business. Anthony Edwards with a poster dunk in that game. He's only 5 of 19 from the field. I believe that dunk was his only two-pointer that he made in the game. But Julius Randle seems to be rounding into form, kind of finding his mojo, finding his ability to impact the game in a positive way where he just wasn't doing early in the season. He had 23 points, 10 rebounds, a couple of assists. He was a plus 13 in this game. Ant was a plus 20, so obviously impacting this game in ways other than shooting the ball. Rudy Gobert had a double-double, 10 points, 12 rebounds, so a lot of good contributions up and down the lineup. Mike Conley Jr. coming off the bench again, a plus 23 in this game, and Naz Reid had an excellent game too, 16 points off the bench. So just kind of the formula right there. They're 3-0 now since the lineup change, and you can say it hasn't just been the lineup change. It's been opponent. It's been how other units have kind of meshed together, but certainly seeing results from that, and certainly now an opportunity to extend this streak. I think Julius Randle kind of spoke to that. They had played a very daunting schedule before this, and now, not that these games are easy, but they've got 3 in a row now where you say, okay, a chance to maybe make this a 6-game winning streak. Tomorrow night against the Grizzlies. A good team, certainly a good team this year, but a team that, is beatable, especially at Target Center. Then they go to the Wizards on Monday next week. That's a game against one of the worst teams in the NBA. The Wizards having a terrible season, a chance for them to collect a win there. And then back at home next Wednesday against Golden State, a team that's kind of been up and down this season. But you look at the NBA standings, you look at the West, it is jam-packed right now between third place and 12th place. The teams are only separated by 6 games, and the Wolves are smashed right in the middle of that. So you can see it's precarious. You got the Grizzlies up there in third place, 24-14. The Wolves a chance to beat them, gain some ground, keep that winning streak going. And then all the way down at 12th place, you got the Suns at 17-19. But it's precarious. Like, you look at it, the Wolves are 7th in the conference right now. A matter of a few games takes you from home court advantage in the first round to then, battling for a play-in spot to being out of the playoffs completely. So you see the importance of every game already, even though they're not even halfway into the season. That's just how the West has been the last few years. That's how the West is going to be the rest of the way. That's what makes, some of the games the Wolves gave away early in the season particularly frustrating. Like, they had a pretty easy schedule to start the year, and they did not take advantage of it. They were not playing their best early in the year. We'll see if that ends up costing them in the end. But right now, chance for them to get back into some of that better position, and they're going to need it because the West is going to be like this all the way to the finish. The Wild, not going to spend too much time on the Wild because they just got steamrolled last night. They are way down with human power. Fleury was sick. That was kind of a minor thing because Gustafson played, but he gave up a bunch of goals to the Avalanche. They lose 6-1. No Kaprizov, no Spurgeon. That's been kind of the case for a little while here, but then no Brock Faber and no Jonas Brodin. You got no Spurgeon, Brodin, and Faber. You are going to struggle on defense, and we saw that last night against Colorado. 6-1 is the final. Again, the Wild need to hope, A, they are healthy soon, B, that this little dip for Gustafson, remember, he got pulled from the most recent game. He got 4 in that win the other night against the Blues where Fleury came in relief, and they ended up rallying to win 6-4. This game, they just couldn't pull it out. Gustafson gave up 6, so they got to get him back rolling, and they got to get everybody healthy if they are going to continue the season they had been having. Let's bring in Ben Goessling from the Star Tribune right now. Plenty busy, so I appreciate your time, Ben. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Just hanging out in the new digs.
Love it. Yeah,
it's finally done. So I did my big Vikings big question video from here earlier this week. But yeah, it's fun to have it done. Fun to have the studio ready, and looking forward to using it.
It's a clean look. I like it. Yeah.
Got the glossy Star Tribune covers in the back.
Yes,
Yes,
I love it.
See the Let's Go Crazy cover. Yep.
That was their not their most recent playoff win. I guess they won a game in 2019, but
second most recent.
Yes, and they had to 2019. I guess was their most recent playoff win, the most recent road playoff win as well, because they won that game at New Orleans, right?
Yep.
So the last two playoff wins were against New Orleans. They played again, of course, in 2022. That one didn't go as well. However far they're going to go this year, there's certainly a number of factors, but playing Monday against the Rams, you have to figure Sam Darnold is number one on the list of influencing factors from their side of the ball. He had a bad game against the Lions in a big moment. I'm going to read. I was reading ESPN Bill Barnwell as kind of like his picks, and man, he was unsparing in his assessment of kind of Darnold's game and kind of giving his prediction on Monday's game. I think this must be ESPN stats number. He said he had an off-target rate of 34.2%. In the game against the Lions, which was the second worst of his career, trailing only the infamous Seeing Ghosts game. And he said, any quarterback can miss a throw or two, but I'm not sure anybody has left more big plays and potential touchdowns on the field with missed throws in a single game this season than Darnold did last week. Now, that's probably like some recency bias, big game bias, but he was bad at a bad spot. So how do they kind of go about quickly either getting him to forget about that or getting him to learn from that before Monday?
Yeah, it's a lot. And we should point out that the only times they've lost this season prior to Sunday were Lions and Rams in the same week. They have more time between Lions and Rams games this time, but it's the same sequence. They have to go beat the team that they lost to in LA on a Thursday night in October. And to do that, you have to get Darnold sorted out pretty quickly. It'll be interesting to hear from Kevin O'Connell throughout the week on this about kind of how the week has gone for Darnold, because the last time he had a game where it was this off, I mean, they won the game, but it was that Jacksonville game where he threw, I think, three or maybe even, I think it was maybe four interceptions.
Three interceptions, all of them with Jefferson targeted.
Yes, yeah, and a lot of the throws he missed on Sunday night were to Jefferson as well. So that game, Kevin O'Connell has talked about this. Darnold came in that Monday basically looking at the film and kind of did a lot of the self-critique without coaches needing to be terribly involved in it. He was looking at things saying, I need to hit that throw, or I need to hold, get rid of the ball here, or I need to, my footwork is bad here. I mean, that's the thing that they talk about with him a lot. And his footwork is typically pretty good. Sunday night, it was not. I mean, he was jittery, and I thought just looked affected by the rush. I don't know if he was affected by the moment. You kind of hope that's not what it is, because the moments are not getting smaller. I mean, that for all intents and purposes was a playoff game. So I think one of the things they have to figure out this week is how much of that was just being a victim of the stage, because if that's
game
the case, you're not going to, that's not going to go away. So a lot of the coaching this week, I think, is sorting out what happened, how much of it was mechanical, how much of it was mental, and then being able to diagnose it and fix it as quickly as you can.
Well, he's never played in a playoff game, right? Like, he's never played in, as much as he faced scrutiny in New York, being the number 3 overall pick in the biggest media market in the United States. He didn't play in any of those kind of like must-have games. Like, they had some success. I think one of the years he was there, he was maybe like 7-6 as starter. So I'm sure they were playing in games that had playoff implications or playoff possibilities. But there's a difference between that and, hey, win and you're the 1 seed, or now this week win or go home. And so that's got to be something that's in the back of their minds. Like, hey, we don't know how he's going to respond to this moment, because he hasn't been in this moment before. Yeah,
I think if I'm Kevin O'Connell this week, and I'm not sure that he's listening to our podcast looking for advice, but on the off chance that he is, here would be my advice, which is worth the oxygen that I spent to say it. But I would be going to him and saying, look, you won in Seattle 3 weeks ago and became the first Vikings quarterback to win in that building since 2006. That was a team that was playing for its life. It's not win or go home, but that building, the weather, the moment they were in, remember that last drive was when that headset went out. and he
Right.
couldn't get the play. He basically improvises something, say, we're going to get something called based on this family of plays. I'm going to run for a first down. I'm going to walk over to Kevin O'Connell, get the next call, and we're going to go from there. He gets hit, has to limp off a hit, and then the next play hits that touchdown to Justin Jefferson
Right.
to put them in charge to win the game. So I would be reminding him of that. I mean, I think about runners that I coach where they get into big spots and they're in a state meet for the first time and they're nervous because there's people in the crowd more so than there normally are at a track meet. And they kind of get wide eyes and I say, hey, we're doing the same thing. I mean, it's the old Gene Hackman measure the court thing in Hoosiers, but it's the same stuff. You just have to let all that other extraneous stuff kind of fade into the background. So I think I'd be reminding him of that. I'd be reminding him of the Packers game. He has played in big spots. It's just this one takes on a different significance because it is single elimination. I think trying to move him out of that as much as you can is probably a worthwhile exercise.
Yeah, I mean, and they should be heartened by the fact that after that Jacksonville game, he went on a stretch of his best football of the year. So in terms of like being able to shake off a bad performance, I don't think they have to worry about that. What I do think they have to kind of put into perspective is, how will he perform in a moment like this? And it's a tough matchup, tough opponent. We'll get to that in a minute.
You did not bring in Kelly Clarkson when you said a moment like this, so thank you.
I do my best. So one interesting subplot this week before we get into some of the other matchup stuff is you had a big story on the Will family last week, talking about just kind of 20 years of ownership, 20 seasons of ownership. And in there, their admiration for Kevin O'Connell. Then, of course, Sunday morning, you get the Jay Glazer report. Hey, multiple teams are interested in trying to trade for Kevin O'Connell if for some reason, going into his last year of his contract, if something's not going there. It seems to me that's kind of it's a small, it's not like it's a manufactured story, because I'm sure teams would love to have Kevin O'Connell, but from your perspective, the Wilfs are going to shut that down, right?
I think they are. I mean, they have no interest in trading him. That's not something that's on their radar whatsoever. The thing that is worth noting here, though, is it does take two to tango, and I think they'll come to Kevin O'Connell with an offer that is pretty significant. I do wonder if what that looks like. Is it money? Is it structure of leadership in terms of who reports to whom? I don't know that he's looking for any of those things, but I have wondered that. I mean, he's involved enough in a lot of the front office stuff that is there some different structure he's looking for? And this is total conjecture. I've heard none of that. Okay. But just what else could somebody want? I mean, certainly money, security, all of that kind of stuff is a lot of it, especially when he's going into the last year of his contract. I do know that when Mark Wilf talked about it in August, that that was a bit of a surprise to Kevin O'Connell in terms of where they were at and all of those things. I think the fact that they haven't done something to this point is he's not unaware of that. And the interest around the league is a real thing. I've heard that.
Sure.
I mean, people know contracts. People talk to, his agent, Trace Armstrong, represents enough coaches around the league. There's enough conversation. Everybody knows that his contract is up after next year. So there are teams that are watching it. His stock around the league could not be much higher right now. Right. But, when it comes down to it, I think the Wilfs have shown, whether it was any of the examples in my story or the fact that they spent $2 million on tickets for basically make themselves a ticket exchange seller for the league to get more Vikings fans there. They are not shy about spending money on the things that they think will help the team win. They 100% see Kevin O'Connell as someone who will help the team win. My guess is it gets done. My guess is it's very lucrative. And it's, hey, we'd like to pay you a lot of money to continue to coach Justin Jefferson in his prime with a quarterback that you picked that will be in the organization, whether or not he's starting next year or whether it's Sam Darnold. And you'll be doing it in gestures at everything in terms of this building, this facility, all of this stuff. My guess is he'll say, yeah, that sounds pretty good. So I don't think it's something the fans need to be terribly worried about at this point. It
was an interesting timing of all of it. And you talking about kind of what else he might want is interesting too, because Kwesi's contract is also up after next year, right? And do we have a sense that, I think Kwesi's had a great year too, right? Like the free agent class that they brought in, kind of in tandem with what the coaches want, has been a huge reason of why they're 14-3 now.
Yes.
Are without like separating the two, like are they a package deal? Are they still kind of linked? Do they want to keep them on the same timeline like they used to with Spielman and Zimmer and stuff like that?
I would think that'd be their preference. And Mark Wilf told me when I was working on that story that they plan to have conversations about contracts with both Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah after the season. I would think that they would try to get that done. Kevin O'Connell has some leverage in terms of how the coaching is going. I would think Kwesi would be able to make that argument as well, to say, look, all of these free agents that are here, we hit on all of them, and this season doesn't happen without that. Right. He will have to, I think, answer for the draft record. I mean, that is the big thing that when you talk about Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah's tenure, people bring up, and they've found other ways to build a competitive team. I mean, they've winning 13 games or more twice. That Kevin O'Connell is the first coach to do that, which means Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah is the first general manager to do that. I'm trying to think back to if it's never happened. So it's never happened for another GM either, and he would be able to say that too. Look, I'm in charge of a roster that's won 13 plus games twice. Yeah. So that's a strong argument as well. I just think in terms of the impression that Kevin O'Connell has generated around the NFL, the work he's done with Sam Darnold, a guy that everybody had given up on, as Kevin O'Connell has been not afraid to point out. Yeah. He's going to have a pretty strong case to make. So I would think they try to keep them together, but they're not negotiating as a package. They are negotiating separately. They have different agents. They have different cases to make. The meetings will not be, hey, let's get a deal done as a group effort. So I do think that's fair to wonder about how all that's going to go.
Seems to me that it is less likely, and I don't know where you put this on the spectrum, less likely that Brian Flores is back next year. And he's talked this week about it's got to be the right opportunity if a head coaching job comes along. That said, you talk about someone's stock not being any higher, Kevin O'Connell's stock is through the roof right now. So is Brian Flores. You have a 14-3 season where you have one of the best defenses in the league. That is your time to jump back in and get another head coaching job if one is presented to you.
It is, but there are going to be things he has to answer. I mean, the first thing he's going to get asked about is Tua Tagovailoa's comments about him being a, quote, horrible person, and some of the things Ryan Fitzpatrick has said.
And the Tua stuff was just rehashed early in the season, right? Or
that was in training camp. And Flores addressed it in a press conference at training camp, during which, if people don't remember, Josh Metellus and Harrison Phillips came up there and stood behind him, basically for the visual of "we are with this guy." And my story for Sunday in the paper is actually about the relationship between O'Connell and Flores. And Flores was pretty candid in a lot of my conversations with him about the ways he's changed as a coach. He told a pretty interesting story about actually coaching his son in basketball, that kind of an exchange they had. And, a lot of fathers and sons, or fathers and daughters can relate to this. I mean, I can think of times where I've coached my own kids, and you say something and they hear it not just as coach, but also coach and dad. And they imply that, or they infer that there's a larger meaning to it, and you're just trying to give a coaching point. So he said that this exchange he had with his son, he basically told him, hey, you need to box out. And it was pretty matter of fact, but his son kind of received that in a way that he thought he was saying, you don't think I do anything right. You're disappointed in me. And he's like, whoa, that's not what I'm meaning here at all. And when he said that, it's like, I've had that conversation with my kids. But the thing he said next was, it made me think, are there players that when I coach them a certain way, hear that the same as my son did? So he talked about a lot of the changes he's made in terms of, he'll kind of say, now, don't you think it's a reasonable expectation for you to box out, considering that your coach is asking you to do that? So he'll frame it differently with players. And he said he's just learned that this generation is different. And he talked about his own background growing up in a tough neighborhood in Brooklyn. He said, my mom was the classic if you get a 99 on a test, she's like, well, what happened to the other point? So
Right.
learning the difference in this generation, he said a lot of it is, I don't want to be behind at anything. So this is an evolution I've had to make. And I think he's been pretty introspective. And we heard him be pretty introspective after the Tua stuff too. But there's a lot in that story about that. And he's even talked about kind of learning from Kevin O'Connell and his way with players. So it's a lot of art of coaching stuff in that story, which I thought was pretty interesting that he went to the degree that he did. He certainly knows that he's going to get asked that stuff, that there is a narrative out there about him. But I think, is going to be prepared to discuss, probably in a lot of those examples with owners, how he's changed, how he would work with a quarterback. If the Bears are hiring him, they need to know he can work with a quarterback. That is job one. I'm also interested to see how the lawsuit stuff will play, because that's still active. And is an NFL team going to hire him when he's suing several members of the membership, as the owners call themselves? We'll see about that one. But yes, his stock, in terms of what he did with the defense, in terms of what Kevin O'Connell says he means to this team, in terms of how players talk about him, could not be much higher right now. And he's got 3 kids at home. He said, a lot of the work-life balance, to the extent that an NFL coach ever gets it, is better as a coordinator than it is as a head coach. So he said that stuff's in my mind too. And I like working here. I like the facilities. I like Minnesota. I like working with Kevin O'Connell. But, if you're somebody that wants to go after those jobs, there are only 32 of them in the world. And he may say, yeah, this is my time to try to take another swing at it. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out.
Final thing, as we kind of shift towards the matchup against the Rams, I mean, sticking with Flores and some of the stuff he said candidly this week, like one of them was, I was surprised, and certainly they were surprised when Puka Nacua played in that Thursday night game, kind of, activated suddenly. His window is open, but then all of a sudden he's playing. Cooper Kupp is back, and Flores saying basically, like, we knew 4 hours before the game, we hadn't really game planned for him. How do you think that kind of like chess match, that kind of psychological chess match, them basically saying we'll be better prepared for that this time? How do you think that all plays out this week?
It's going to be interesting to see that, because that game, I remember that, because I had Puka on my fantasy team, and I thought he'll play a little, but I don't know if I want to start him on a Thursday night when I've had the most injury ravaged fantasy team ever. But doesn't matter. Nobody cares about my fantasy team.
Nobody cares.
Point being, that's right, it was a surprise that Puka played that much. And I think the other thing, it was a lot of the underneath crossing stuff. They did not have Blake Cashman in that game.
That's right.
They will have him this time. I think they'll have a little more of a plan for Puka. But yeah, I think it affects it. I mean, I think having time to say, this guy is going to do this, and this is how we're going to answer it. When you have 4 hours, there's not much you can devise. There's no look team practice where somebody is wearing a Puka Nacua number in practice and you're working against a scout team wide receiver pretending to be him, and all of the things that they're going to do and the ways they're going to scheme you. The offenses are pretty similar with Kevin O'Connell and Sean McVay, but you still want somebody that's kind of working in that role as part of your practice. When you don't have that, it does make it a little harder to react. I think that obviously won't be the case this time. Yeah, I'm interested to see how that goes, because they will have to have an answer for him, just like they have to have an answer for a lot of the crossing stuff the Lions have run on them with quite a bit of success. So, yeah, I think that's one to watch. I think how things look different with the rush plan with Cashman back this time is interesting to watch. And then this seems like about a once a month Matthew Stafford game at this point where he's good. The Vikings got one of those the first time, and he hasn't had one in a few weeks now after that Bills game. So is he due for one of those? I think that quarterback who's been through it and a coach that's been through it in the playoffs, I think it's a tough matchup from that perspective, but we'll see how all of that shakes out on Monday night, wherever we are planning to be.
Yeah, it's another good point. I'm not going to talk too much about that just in case things change a lot between when we record and when this goes live. But are the Rams a particularly bad matchup for them, or do we glean more from that first game that it was one of the better games the Rams played and the Vikings were a little undermanned and unprepared for what they got?
Yeah, I don't think it's a great matchup because of McVay, because of Stafford, because of that front. with Jared Verse and Kobe Turner. I think that front gave them a lot more problems than probably people expected in the first matchup. I think that's going to be a factor this time as well. But yes, we probably are reacting a lot to that game, and they had chances. I mean, that was a game where the red zone told the tale for the Vikings in that one as well. You had Jalen Naylor dropping a pass in the fourth quarter that would have put the Vikings ahead.
Yeah, that's right.
Darnold kind of locked in on Jefferson in a double team when the game was tied in the third quarter, missed Addison, who was open underneath zone coverage for a touchdown. My big question video this week kind of broke down some of those things. So some of it will come down to that. Again, we could talk all we want about matchups and plans and counter plans, but these games come down to one or two plays of somebody executing, holding a block a half second longer, making a catch, getting an angle on a defender, whatever it happens to be. This may come down to that again. So can the Vikings have less playoff experience than the Rams do. There's a lot of players on defense that have been through it. They have more playoff experience than they've had in recent years, but at coach and quarterback, they are less experienced than the Rams are. So how does all of that play out this time? Brian Flores has a lot of experience against Sean McVay, including in a Super Bowl. If he has a full complement, is he better against this Rams team than the Vikings were the first time? So it's a fascinating matchup. There's lots of subplots to it. I think it's not a great one. I think of the teams the Vikings could have faced in the first round or the first playoff game, this is not one I would put at the top of the list of the most favorable matchups for them, but it's a team they should be able to beat if they do everything right. The question is, can they do that?
I think that's fair. We'll unpack it all for sure. By Monday, we'll definitely have some more to say too on the Access Vikings podcast this week and beyond. Ben Goessling, appreciate it as always. I'm sure we'll talk to you soon, and safe travels.
Thanks, Mike. I'll talk to you soon.
Watch your dreams and savings grow with Royal Credit Union's 4.25% annual percentage yield 12-month certificate. Open now at any Royal office or online at rcu.org/certificate saver. Early withdrawal penalties could reduce earnings and principal. APY accurate as of 2/1/25. Insured by NCUA.
Great stuff from Ben. Again, follow all of our coverage. Star Tribune, StarTribune.com. More Access Vikings podcasts to come this week. Probably some special content on Monday as well. We'll have a whole crew out in Arizona to cover that Vikings-Rams game at that neutral site in Arizona. I know they've been scrambling, rearranging travel, stuff like that, but they will be out there covering that game. I'll probably have a post-game podcast Monday night as well, so look for all of that and more coming your way. Well, let's finish quickly with the cooler. Man, that was a good college football playoff semifinal last night. I didn't watch the whole thing, but Notre Dame and Penn State locked into a tense battle throughout, back and forth. Mistakes kind of told the story of the game towards the end. You know, both teams forced punts late. Penn State gets the ball back at its own, I think, 15 with like 50 seconds left, tied 24-24. They get a running play out to like the 28, so they're like, okay, maybe we can try to drive down, get into field goal range, things like that. Next pass intercepted. Notre Dame takes over in Penn State territory. They move the ball, 20-ish yards. Game-winning field goal with like 5 seconds left. They win 27-24. Notre Dame all the way into the championship game, awaiting the winner of Ohio State and Texas. It's been an interesting playoff so far. The first year of it, the seeding, how that went. You see a lot of the rust, I think, and a lot of the kind of the challenge of who got the buys, who didn't get the buys, things like that. Maybe once they go to 16 teams, it'll be a little different. But I think for right now, you're seeing some pretty good games at this point. Now that you're getting down to it, I hope that Ohio State and Texas follows that same script. But yeah, it was a good one last night. It was fun to watch. I'm into this more than I would have been in a traditional bowl season. I think I get to know these teams a little bit more. You get to follow their journey a little bit more. And I am sure Star Tribune Timberwolves writer Chris Hine is very excited about what he is seeing now from his Notre Dame Fighting Irish. That will do it for me today. Like I said, plenty of stuff coming up into the weekend, and on Monday for sure. Royce for the regular show Monday. Plenty of stuff beyond that. Until then, I am Michael Rand, back at it again in a few days.